Husband left me for my boss and took our investments. He had no idea what was coming. The first time I realized my husband might be sleeping with my boss was when he leaned across our kitchen island, the Carrara marble one he'd insisted we needed despite the cost, and casually commented that Sylvie's new haircut made her look like a young Nicole Kidman. It wasn't the compliment itself that caught my attention. It was the specificity of it, the intimate familiarity of that observation. Aaron had met Sylvie exactly twice at company events where she'd shaken his hand, asked the obligatory spouse questions, and moved on to more important conversations. Yet somehow he'd formed a detailed opinion on her styling choices. "When did you see Sylvie's new haircut?" I asked, keeping my tone light as I loaded the dishwasher. Aaron froze for just a millisecond before reaching for his wine glass. "At the Christmas party, I guess, or maybe you showed me a photo." I hadn't, but I nodded and changed the subject. Filing away that tiny hesitation like the financial advisor, I was a small discrepancy that might signify nothing or might be the first indicator of a major problem. I wish I could say I immediately investigated, that I heroically uncovered the affair through brilliant detective work. The truth is more pathetic. I spent 3 months ignoring increasingly obvious signs, making excuses for late nights and weekend golf games, despite Aaron's long-standing hatred of golf. I convinced myself that the growing distance between us was just a phase, that the lipstick shade on his collar, a vibrant coral that Sylvie wore religiously, must have transferred from someone else. It's remarkable what we can talk ourselves out of seeing when the truth is too painful to acknowledge. The actual confirmation came on a rainy Tuesday in April, delivered not through a dramatic confrontation, but via a casual phone call while I was picking up dry cleaning. "Claire," Aaron said when I answered, his voice carrying that rehearsed quality I recognized from his sales pitches. "I need to tell you something important. I'm not coming home tonight, well, I'm not coming home again." I stood frozen between racks of plastic-wrapped clothes, the weight of hangers suddenly unbearable in my free hand. "I've realized I haven't been happy for a long time," he continued, the words flowing too smoothly, too prepared. "I deserve to be with someone who truly understands me, who shares my ambitions. I've fallen in love with Sylvie. Sylvie, my boss of 5 years, the woman who had just last week taken me to lunch to discuss my promising future at Reynolds Wealth Management, who had gushed about the Mediterranean cruise she was planning, a girls' trip, she'd called it, though she'd been conspicuously vague about which girls would be joining her. Claire, are you there? Say something." What could I possibly say? That he'd managed to destroy both my marriage and my career in a single phone call? That I was standing in Martinizing dry cleaners, holding his freshly pressed shirts, while he was ending our 8-year marriage? How long, I asked instead, my financial advisor brain still functioning on some level, gathering data, assessing damage. "That's not important right now," Aaron hedged. "What matters is that we—" "How long?" Each word distinct, non-negotiable. A sigh. 6 months, but it only got serious recently. 6 months. Since the company holiday party, the one where I'd introduced them properly, where I'd been so proud to show off my handsome husband to my colleagues, where Sylvie had complimented my lucky catch with a friendly squeeze of my arm. "Claire, I've already packed my things. I'm staying at Sylvie's place for now. I think it's best if we communicate through lawyers from this point." I hung up. The dry cleaning attendant was staring at me with naked concern. "Bad news?" she asked, her name tag Denise swimming into focus as I blinked back tears. "My husband just left me for my boss," I heard myself say with bizarre detachment, over the phone, while I was picking up his shirts. Denise's eyes widened. "The asshole!" "Yes," I agreed, surprising myself with a choked laugh. "The asshole." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Leave the shirts. I'll make sure something unfortunate happens to them." "No," I replied, suddenly decisive. "I'll take them, but thank you for the offer." As I carried Aaron's perfectly pressed shirts to my car, something shifted inside me. The shock was still there, but beneath it, a cold clarity was emerging. If Aaron thought he could simply walk away from our marriage with a phone call and some vague mention of lawyers, he didn't know me nearly as well as he thought. Because while I had apparently failed to notice my husband's infidelity, I was exceptionally good at my job advising high net worth clients on strategies to protect and grow their assets. And the first rule I taught every new client was always plan for the worst case scenario. Fortunately for me, I had been following my own professional advice for years. 3 hours after Aaron's call, I sat in my home office surrounded by financial statements, legal documents, and a half-empty bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. The initial shock had given way to methodical analysis, my emotional defenses manifesting as spreadsheets and contingency plans. First, I checked our joint investment account, the one we'd built together from the early days of our marriage. Empty. Aaron had transferred the entire balance, $342,876, to an account I didn't recognize. The transaction had processed that morning, shortly before his phone call. Most women would panic at this discovery. I permitted myself exactly 30 seconds of blind rage before allowing a small, grim smile to form. Because what Aaron didn't know, what I had never told him, was that I had been gradually restructuring our finances for years. Not out of suspicion, but out of professional habit. As a financial advisor who regularly saw wealthy marriages implode in spectacular fashion, I had internalized the importance of separate assets. While Aaron focused on the obvious joint accounts, the showy stock portfolio that he checked obsessively, I had been quietly building my own financial fortress, retirement accounts maximized in my name alone. A separate investment portfolio disguised among mundane household accounts he never bothered to examine. And most importantly, detailed records of every penny I had brought into the marriage versus what he had contributed. His theft of our joint account was unfortunate but far from catastrophic. In fact, his naked grab confirmed something I had long suspected for all his talk of financial savvy. Aaron understood money primarily as a scorecard, a way to keep track of who was winning. He had taken what was visible, what would hurt me immediately, without considering the longer game. My next call was to Lawrence Chen, a divorce attorney I had met through a client. I'd always liked Lawrence's methodical approach and his reputation for negotiating settlements that avoided the scorched earth tactics many divorce lawyers employed. "Let me understand correctly," Lawrence said after I explained the situation. "Your husband emptied your joint account, left you for your boss, and thinks you'll now quietly proceed with a standard divorce. That summarizes it, yes?" Lawrence's laugh was short and without humor. "And you're certain about the affair with your boss? This could impact not just your divorce, but potentially your employment situation." "I'm certain," I replied, pulling up the folder on my laptop where I had begun compiling evidence, the credit card statements showing lunches at hotels across town on days Aaron claimed to be meeting clients, the rideshare receipts to and from Sylvie's address that automatically synced to our shared family account, the text messages to Golf Buddy S that appeared on our phone bill with suspicious frequency. As I scrolled through these digital breadcrumbs, another realization struck me with chilling clarity. I handled sensitive financial information for ultra-wealthy clients, information that could be extremely valuable to someone with Aaron's skill set and questionable ethics. Had that been Sylvie's angle all along? Our firm maintained strict client confidentiality, but as my direct supervisor, she had access to all my client files. Had she pursued Aaron to gain insights into my clients' portfolios? Or had Aaron targeted her? Recognizing an opportunity to leverage her position, either scenario made my stomach turn, but both presented strategic advantages if handled correctly. "Lawrence," I said slowly, "I need to tell you something else. This situation may involve more than just infidelity. There could be professional ethics violations, possibly even corporate espionage aspects." The silence on the other end lengthened. "Claire," Lawrence finally said, "I think you should come to my office first thing tomorrow. And in the meantime, don't speak to either your husband or your boss. Document everything, back up any evidence you've collected, and get some rest. This is going to require very careful handling." After hanging up, I poured myself another glass of wine and stared out the window at the manicured garden Aaron had insisted on hiring a service to maintain. "Appearances matter in my business," he'd explained, though he rarely did more than glance at it through the window. The crisp edges of the boxwoods, the geometrically perfect flower beds, everything designed to project success and control. That garden was the perfect metaphor for our marriage, a beautiful facade maintained at considerable expense, primarily for others to admire. And like most meticulously maintained facades, it revealed nothing about the foundation beneath. I took a long sip of wine and opened a new spreadsheet titled Exit Strategy. If Aaron and Sylvie wanted to play games, they were about to discover they'd chosen the wrong opponent. The next 2 weeks unfolded with the surreal quality of a particularly vivid anxiety dream. I continued going to work as if nothing had happened, smiling politely when colleagues asked about Aaron, deflecting with vague comments about him traveling for business. Sylvie maintained her own performance, treating me with the same superficial warmth she always had, inquiring about my weekend plans while knowing perfectly well that my husband was currently occupying her guest bedroom, or more likely, her main one. It was Oscar-worthy. Her concern when I mentioned I wasn't sleeping well. Her sympathetic nod when I blamed it on some personal matters I was dealing with. Not once did her perfect mask slip, not even when she leaned across her desk during our weekly one-on-one meeting and conspiratorially suggested I take some personal time if needed. After all, she added with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, everyone goes through rough patches now and then. The important thing is to know when to cut your losses and move forward. I smiled back, matching her performance beat for beat. That's excellent advice, Sylvie. I've always admired your ability to make clean breaks when something isn't working out. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face had I emphasized clean breaks too pointedly, but she recovered quickly. Well, that's the key to success, isn't it, knowing when to hold on and when to let go? Meanwhile, I was far from idle. With Lawrence's guidance, I had begun meticulously documenting everything Aaron's financial maneuvers, the timeline of the affair, and any potentially questionable interactions between Aaron and Sylvie that might have compromised client information. The most disturbing discovery came when I reviewed Aaron's recent business activities. As the founder of a boutique investment advisory service targeting successful entrepreneurs, Aaron had recently signed 3 new high-value clients, all of whom happened to be clients I had personally onboarded at Reynolds Wealth Management within the past year. This couldn't be coincidence. Someone had provided Aaron with inside information about these clients, their net worth, investment preferences, even the personal details that would help him craft the perfect pitch. And there was only one person who had access to all of that information besides me. I brought this evidence to Lawrence, who whistled softly as he reviewed the files. This changes the dynamic significantly, he said, leaning back in his chair. What we have here potentially violates securities regulations, confidentiality agreements, and possibly rises to the level of corporate espionage. What do we do with it? I asked. Lawrence considered the question carefully. That depends on what outcome you want. Claire, we could take this to Reynolds' compliance department or even regulatory authorities. That would likely end both their careers, possibly result in legal charges. I thought about it, weighing the satisfaction of watching Aaron and Sylvie face professional ruin against the collateral damage such a move would cause to the firm, to innocent colleagues, and to my own reputation. I don't want to destroy them, I said finally. I just want what's fair, and I want to ensure they can't do this to anyone else. Lawrence nodded approvingly. Then we use this as leverage in negotiations. We don't explicitly threaten to expose them, but we make it clear that you have documented everything and are prepared to defend yourself thoroughly if they don't agree to reasonable terms. And what about my job? I can't continue working for Sylvie. No, Lawrence agreed. But with this documentation, you might be in a position to negotiate a separation package from Reynolds, assuming you want to leave rather than see Sylvie removed. I considered this, despite everything. I had built a good reputation and client base at Reynolds. Starting over elsewhere would mean rebuilding from scratch, proving myself again. I need to think about that part, I said. For now, let's focus on the divorce settlement. Lawrence smiled. I have a feeling Aaron's going to be very motivated to settle quickly and quietly once he understands what we know. The mediation session was scheduled for a rainy Thursday afternoon at Lawrence's office, neutral territory, that still gave us the home court advantage. I arrived early, dressed in what I thought of as my client confidence outfit, a charcoal gray suit that communicated seriousness without aggression. subtle jewelry that suggested success without ostentation. Aaron arrived 15 minutes late with his attorney, a shark-like woman named Vanessa Powell, known for her scorched-earth approach to divorce proceedings. His entrance was pure theater hair, perfectly styled, Italian suit impeccably tailored, cologne announcing his presence seconds before he did. This was Aaron in full sales mode, the version he deployed when trying to close an especially valuable client. Claire. He greeted me with practiced warmth, as if we were meeting for an anniversary dinner rather than divorce negotiations. You're looking well. I simply nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. Up close, I could see stress lines around his eyes that his expensive grooming routine couldn't quite conceal. Good. Let him worry. Once everyone was settled, Vanessa wasted no time establishing her client's position. My client has generously prepared an initial settlement offer, she began, sliding folders across the table. Given the brief duration of the marriage and Mr. Hamilton's significantly higher contribution to the marital assets, we believe this represents more than fair compensation. Lawrence and I reviewed the document together. Aaron was offering me exactly half of what was in our joint accounts, or rather, what had been in them before he emptied them and nothing else. No portion of his business, no share of our home equity, nothing from the investment properties he had purchased during our marriage. This is your opening offer, Lawrence asked, his tone making it clear how absurd he found it. Vanessa's smile didn't waver. Mr. Hamilton built his business before the marriage. The home was purchased primarily with his down payment. The investment properties are held in his company's name. Ms. Porter's contributions were minimal. I remained silent, watching Aaron, rather than his attorney. His expression was smug. Confident, he truly believed I would accept this insult of an offer rather than fight. Lawrence closed the folder with deliberate slowness. Before we continue, I'd like to clarify some facts about the marital assets and certain extracurricular activities that may be relevant to these negotiations. Aaron shifted slightly in his seat, the first crack in his confident facade. Lawrence opened his own folder. First, regarding contributions to the marriage, Ms. Porter's financial records clearly document that she contributed 58% of the down payment for the marital home, contrary to Mr. Hamilton's claim. Furthermore, her income consistently matched or exceeded Mr. Hamilton's for the first 5 years of their marriage, during which time his business was established and grew using shared resources. Vanessa started to interrupt, but Lawrence held up a hand. I'm not finished. We have also documented substantial commingling of assets, with Ms. Porter's earnings being used to support the household while Mr. Hamilton reinvested his income into his business, a business that would therefore be considered marital property under state law. Aaron's confident expression was beginning to falter. This wasn't following the script he had imagined. But most significantly, Lawrence continued, sliding across several documents of his own, we have compiled extensive documentation of Mr. Hamilton's relationship with Ms. Porter's supervisor, Sylvie Matthews, including evidence suggesting this relationship facilitated the inappropriate transfer of confidential client information from Reynolds Wealth Management to Mr. Hamilton's competing business. The color drained from Aaron's face. Vanessa quickly scanned the documents, her practiced neutrality slipping as she absorbed their contents. These are serious allegations, she said carefully. They are, Lawrence agreed. Allegations supported by substantial evidence that would be of great interest to Reynolds' compliance department, securities regulators, and the clients whose confidentiality was breached. Aaron leaned forward, anger replacing shock. This is blackmail. Not at all, I said, speaking for the first time. This is me protecting myself and the clients who trusted me with their financial information that somehow found its way into your client list. I met Aaron's gaze directly. I don't want to destroy your career or Sylvie's. I don't want a messy public battle. I simply want what's fair recognition of my contributions to our life together, and assurance that this breach of trust won't happen again. Lawrence slid across our counter-proposal equal division of all marital assets, including Aaron's business value accrued during the marriage, the house to be sold with proceeds split, and a non-disclosure agreement that would protect all parties from public exposure. Additionally, Lawrence added, Ms. Porter requires written confirmation that Mr. Hamilton will return any confidential client information obtained from Reynolds Wealth Management and will not solicit any additional Reynolds clients for a period of 5 years. Aaron and Vanessa whispered furiously for several minutes before Vanessa addressed us again. "We'll need to review these terms more carefully and perhaps suggest some adjustments," she said. Her shark-like confidence notably diminished. "Of course," Lawrence replied smoothly. "We're prepared to be reasonable in negotiations. However, I should note that if we cannot reach an agreement within 2 weeks, my client will have no choice but to bring her concerns about potential corporate espionage to the appropriate authorities." Aaron's jaw clenched visibly. "Can Claire and I have a moment alone?" he asked abruptly. Lawrence glanced at me questioningly. I nodded. Once the attorneys had stepped out, Aaron dropped all pretense of civility. "You're seriously threatening to destroy everything I've built," he demanded. "After all I've done for you." The sheer audacity of his self-righteousness almost made me laugh. "All you've done for me? You mean like sleeping with my boss? Emptying our joint accounts? Trying to walk away with everything while leaving me nothing? That money was primarily from my earnings." "No, Aaron," I interrupted firmly. "That's a lie you've told yourself for so long you actually believe it. I've documented every dollar that went into our life together. I know exactly who paid for what, who sacrificed what, who contributed what. And unlike you, I have the spreadsheets to prove it." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "I never thought you'd fight like this," he admitted. "You've always been so accommodating." "That was my mistake," I acknowledged. "I confused being a supportive partner with being a doormat. I won't make that mistake again." Aaron ran a hand through his perfect hair, disheveling it in a way that would have once made my heart skip. "What do you really want, Claire?" Exactly what Lawrence outlined: a fair division of what we built together, protection for my clients, and a clean break. No revenge, no public humiliation, just equity. He studied me for a long moment, calculation replacing anger in his expression. "And if I agree to your terms, all of this stays private. The affair, the client information, all of it." "Yes, the NDA would protect both sides." Aaron nodded slowly. "I need to speak with Vanessa, but I think we can work something out." As he stood to leave, curiosity compelled me to ask one final question. Was it worth it, Aaron risking everything for Sylvie? A flicker of something doubt, regret crossed his face before his salesman's mask slipped back into place. "Sylvie understands ambition. She doesn't apologize for wanting more." "Neither do I," I replied quietly. "I just never confused more with taking what isn't mine." He had no answer for that. The settlement was finalized within 10 days, record speed in divorce proceedings. Aaron agreed to essentially all our terms, making only minor adjustments that Lawrence assured me were inconsequential. He kept his business, but bought out my portion of its value. We sold the house, splitting the proceeds equally. The investment properties were liquidated and divided. Most importantly, Aaron signed a stringent non-solicitation agreement regarding Reynolds' clients and returned all confidential information he had obtained. Throughout this period, Sylvie maintained her remarkable performance at work, treating me with the same superficial concern as always. If she was aware of the settlement negotiations or the evidence we had compiled regarding her role in the client information transfer, she gave no indication. It was almost admirable, her commitment to the pretense. She continued our weekly check-ins, praised my client retention numbers, and even had the breathtaking audacity to suggest I take on a mentoring role for newer advisors. "You have such a steady personality, Claire," she commented during what would be our final one-on-one meeting. "Not everyone can compartmentalize personal difficulties the way you do. It's really quite impressive." I smiled, allowing myself to finally drop my own pretense just slightly. "I've had excellent models for professional compartmentalization recently. It's been quite educational." Her perfectly maintained smile flickered momentarily. "Well, we all do what we must to succeed." "Indeed we do," I agreed pleasantly. "By the way, I've been meaning to ask, how's that Mediterranean cruise planning going? The one you mentioned a few weeks ago." Sylvie's hand froze mid-gesture. "I had to postpone it. Work commitments, you know how it is. I do know, I said, standing to leave. Plans change, sometimes quite dramatically. The next morning, I submitted my resignation letter, citing professional development opportunities elsewhere as my reason for leaving. Along with it, I delivered a sealed envelope to the head of compliance detailing my concerns about potential client information breaches, carefully phrased as observations rather than accusations, with no direct mention of Sylvie or Aaron. I didn't need to destroy Sylvie directly. The compliance team would investigate, connect the dots, and reach their own conclusions. Whether she survived professionally would depend on how thoroughly she and Aaron had covered their tracks and how valuable the firm considered her compared to the risk she represented. My last act before leaving Reynolds was to contact each of my clients personally, explaining my departure and recommending they request a thorough review of their account security and confidentiality protections. Not explicitly linking these recommendations to Sylvie, but ensuring they would ask the right questions of whoever inherited their portfolios. I had learned from Aaron's self-destruction that revenge served hot often burns the person delivering it. Far better to simply create conditions where natural consequences could unfold organically, without my fingerprints visibly directing the outcome. 6 months later, I sat in the sleek conference room of Integrity Wealth Advisors, the boutique firm I had joined as a senior advisor and partner. My client, a recently divorced doctor rebuilding her financial future, was reviewing the comprehensive plan I had developed for her. "This is remarkable, Claire," she said, looking up from the detailed projections. "You've thought of everything, including scenarios I hadn't even considered." "That's my job," I replied with a genuine smile, planning for contingencies others might miss. My phone buzzed discreetly with a news alert, one I had specifically set up months ago. The headline made me pause momentarily. Reynolds Wealth Management announces leadership restructuring. Head of Private Client Division steps down amid internal review. I silenced the notification without reading further. Whatever was happening at Reynolds and to Sylvie specifically was no longer my concern. I had built something new, something better aligned with my values, a practice focused on helping clients navigate financial transitions with both technical expertise and ethical clarity. After my client left, I allowed myself a moment to reflect on how dramatically my life had changed in half a year. The devastating betrayal that had initially seemed like an ending had instead forced me to recognize my own strength and value. I had emerged not just financially intact, but professionally enhanced, with a clearer sense of purpose than I'd had in years. My office phone rang, interrupting my reflections. My assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Claire, there's an Aaron Hamilton on line 2. He says it's important." I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided against it. Whatever Aaron wanted, I could handle it with the same calm professionalism I now brought to every aspect of my life. "Aaron?" I greeted him neutrally. "What can I do for you?" His voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confident polish. "Claire, I wanted to let you know that Sylvie and I have decided to go our separate ways." "I see," I replied, unsurprised. Relationships built on mutual deception rarely stood the test of time. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you really—" A hint of bitterness crept into his tone. "Yes, actually, I don't wish unhappiness on either of you, contrary to what you might believe." A long pause followed. "There's something else," he finally continued. "Some of my clients have been asking questions, specifically the ones who used to be with Reynolds. Questions about how I came to approach them initially." The seeds I'd planted were bearing fruit. "That sounds challenging." "Did you say something to them?" he asked directly. "Because if you violated the NDA—" "I didn't need to say anything, Aaron," I interrupted calmly. "Thoughtful people eventually ask questions when patterns become obvious. That's why long-term planning is so important, something I tried to teach you during our marriage." Another extended silence. "I underestimated you," he finally admitted. "I always thought you were the safe choice, reliable, predictable." "Your mistake was confusing kindness for weakness," I replied. "It's a common error. Would you consider having coffee sometime to talk?" I almost laughed at the audacity. "No, Aaron, I wouldn't. But I wish you well in rebuilding whatever comes next for you, without shortcuts this time." After hanging up, I turned back to my computer where I'd been reviewing the financial plan for my next client, a young woman starting her own business after leaving a toxic workplace. As I fine-tuned the projections to give her the strongest possible foundation, I reflected on the most valuable lesson from my divorce: true security comes not from binding yourself to someone else's vision, but from building systems resilient enough to weather unexpected storms. It was the same principle that guided my approach to financial planning. And now, my approach to life: identify vulnerabilities, create contingencies, and always maintain your own independent resources, emotional as well as financial. The promotion I never saw coming from accommodating wife to autonomous woman had been painful but ultimately worth every moment of disruption. Unlike the advancement Sylvie had likely hoped for by cultivating her relationship with Aaron, mine was built on genuine value rather than manipulation. And unlike Aaron's business growth strategy of exploiting others' trust, my professional success now rested firmly on a foundation of integrity. As I prepared for my next client meeting, I smiled at the irony. In trying to discard me as irrelevant, Aaron and Sylvie had inadvertently pushed me toward becoming exactly what they had always aspired to be: truly successful. On my own terms, without compromising who I was to get there. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you actively pursue, it's simply becoming the person you were always meant to be, while those who undervalued you struggle to maintain the facades they constructed at your expense.